Welcome back, guys, to Friday Facts number 396 with me, Massive Dynamic. This one is called Sound Improvements in 2.0, and it's by Donian and Ian. And it's all about the sound, obviously, in 2.0. So we start off by talking about working sound accents. And basically, what they're talking about is the fact that whenever you're doing sound design for a video game or anything else, really, if you have single looping sounds, it creates certain issues with gaming. A lot of times, like for instance, when you're in battle right now in Factorio 1.0, and you're fighting a bunch of biters, and you hear the same sounds constantly looping, that kind of gets annoying and irritating a little bit. It's not very interesting. So what they've done is they've introduced levels of sound, not only levels, but variation in the sounds. And they call it, what is the word that they use here? They call it accents. Okay. And so here they have a little graphic of what they mean. Both of these videos are basically the same, but one has a graphic illustration of what they're saying. So I'm going to play this one here first. So this is the new Foundry, and as you can hear, there are different sounds being played at different times. And actually, what they've done is they've timed these sounds and tied them to different events, so that it gives it a more dynamic expression of sound. So here it is with this graph here that shows this big area shows the main sound, and then each of these is the 12 different sounds that can be played during this animation. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so as you can see, there are 12 different sounds, and they play for different periods of time, and they're triggered by different events, which gives it a more kind of eventful sound, a more fulfilling sound for your ears. It makes it feel like you're actually standing next to the foundry. So then they talk about how speeding up sound can change the way sound effects are perceived. For instance, you've all heard, if you simply played a sound faster, it would give you the kind of chipmunk effect. Versus if you just slowed the sound down, it would give you the deeper, it kind of stretches the sound out. So instead of doing that, they've come up with this idea. So let's play these two sounds here. So again, so this is a faster version of the factory or the foundry. And instead of playing each sound faster, they've keyed the sounds to different events. So if the event happens more often, you hear that sound more often. Versus here's a slower version of the factory, and instead of slowing down the sounds, since the sounds are keyed to specific actions, it gives you a much more fulfilling sense that you're standing next to a slower moving foundry than the other one. So let's play this one. See, so the sounds are still full and vibrant, but they're not just sped up or slowed down. They're tied to events that make it feel like something is actually happening, which I think was a pretty genius idea. So then they talk about multiple main working sounds, and they say that let's see, how could they do this in a way that makes it more interesting? So they talk about how they could do it with vehicles specifically. So in 1.1, you get in a car and you drive away. It has basically one sound, and it either gets faster or slower. And it's okay, it goes okay. But now what they've done is they've introduced two different sounds. One sound is for the idling of the car, and the other sound is for when the car is driving. And then not only that, they've added even deeper aspects of the sound for different terrains and different things like that, so that they're keyed at different times so that it gives you a more natural feel of driving a vehicle. And what they've done is they've taken the idle sound, and we'll play it in just a second. And the idle sound kicks in when you start the vehicle, and then that um, diminishes as you start to drive. And then there's a second driving sound, and that one gets louder the faster you go. Okay, so that sound increases, and then the opposite happens when you slow back down and then eventually stop. Then when you stop, as you stop, the idle sound gets louder and the driving sound gets softer. So we're going to see an example of that. And also with the tank, specifically with the tank, they added another set of sounds for the rotation of the tracks, which gives it some real kind of depth of character. So let's take a listen to that one. Okay, pretty nice. So you could probably hear the different layers of sounds. It gives you a more realistic sense that you're actually in or near a vehicle and driving on terrain. Okay, then they talk about how they applied this also to trains, of course. So there's different sounds for the train, especially as it goes over elevated bridges and things. So let's take a listen to that one. Okay, so I think they did a pretty good job with that. I think they could have done a little bit better. If you've ever been near a train, there's a certain kind of a clickety clack noise that trains make as the wheels pass over and the cars pass over. The weight of the cars makes a difference, and it's kind of a clickety clack kind of a noise. I think they could have added a little bit more of that to give it a more natural feel, but otherwise it's pretty good. I like the way when it goes up in the air, you hear that it's elevated. It kind of changes the reverberation of the sound around it, but otherwise, pretty good job there. So now they talk about additional machine sounds, and they talk about the different sounds related to different resources and different tiles. So they wanted to have a system that they creatively named additional sounds, and a bunch of old and new entities already have or already take advantage of this system. Let's take a look at one of them, the big mining drill. Last time it was shown, it had only placeholder sounds. So let's take a listen to the big mining drill now and see what they've done here. Okay, so you could hear there was different kind of sounds, kind of grinding sounds, machinery sounds for like when when the thing is moving on like gear wheels, moving back and forth across kind of the track that the big drill is on. You can hear the kind of rotary sound of the grinder. that's actually harvesting the minerals from the ground. So yeah, that's pretty nice. Okay, so now next they talk about ambient sounds and how they've added some different ambient noises. They added kind of a blooping kind of bloop 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 kind of water sound. They've also added native wildlife sounds. Kind of they call them birds, but some of them don't sound like birds, but they're ish, I guess, bird ish. And they're triggered so that not only when you zoom in and out, different sounds are triggered. The depth of the sound is different depending on your zoom level, but also where you are on the map is going to trigger different sounds. So if you're near the trees, you'll hear more rustling of the leaves. If you're near the water, you'll hear more of the blooping of the water. And day and night is also going to make a difference, which sounds you may or may not hear, which animals, so-called wildlife, may be existing in the trees. They call them invisible wildlife, so that, there's obviously not any actual wildlife to be seen, but perhaps to be heard. Perhaps Bigfoot is out there. I think that's a possibility. Let's give that a listen. Okay, so you probably heard kind of water, kind of lapping noises of water. I think they could have played that up a little bit better. I'm going to play it one more time. I think they could have played up the water noise a little bit if they added some like ripples in the water as it kind of came to towards the beach. If they just had gentle ripples moving, I think it would add to the overall effect. I mean, if they've got leaves moving, I think they could add just a little bit. There is a very slight effect, but it's kind of one dimensional. It kind of moves almost like a misty fog moving from left to right on the screen there. But I think if they added just some light ripple in the water, I think that would have made that much deeper. Um, so other than that, next they talk about item sounds and how they wanted to have a different kind of a sound for different items in your inventory, and help you to be able to distinguish which items you're moving around in your inventory. So they've added a few of those. So let's take a look at that. They're kind of categorized by item type. So like ores are different than plates and other things. So let's take a look at that or listen. So there's not just one standard sound for every item in your inventory. Different items are kind of categorized into different kind of sound um, categories, basically. Um, okay, let's see what else. Advanced volume control. This just goes into some of the features that they've built in to the volume controls and these will be available to modders. So if you're into all that, then you can do some adjusting of the sound yourself and have access to all these different things. Sound aggregation. For instance, in this particular instance, this is what I was talking about earlier. Combat with many different biters, you might have just too much sound or the same sound being repeated over and over. So they've added aggregation to that. In other words, if there's 500 biters dying at once, they don't all make the same sound. There's some variation, and then they also trim out some of them because you can't possibly hear all those different individual sounds. So they give you just enough sound so that you get the effect of what's going on. Kind of like when you hear a crowd at a large sporting event. You don't hear each and every person yelling, but you hear kind of an overall kind of a noise. So they've kind of done that to kind of blend some of the sounds together, so that it gives you the effect of a lot of things happening, with a few accents sprinkled in there to give you more of kind of a personal sound, like you're actually right there in the zone, which they call sound priority. So different sounds are given priority. For instance, GUI effects, player actions are given priority over what would be like background noises, so that it kind of grounds you in your location in the game. Then they talk about the test suite, which, like I said, makes kind of developer tools for the modding community and others to deal with the sounds, and kind of fiddle with them to maybe have the ability to create some other sound effects in game using the basic features that they've added. And then finally, they talk about music, and apparently there's a new musical score for Space Age, but they're not ready to reveal that yet. That will be in an upcoming FFF. So there you have it, guys. As always, sound out your thoughts at the usual places is how they end it. So I think that's pretty good. I mean, to be honest with you guys, the past several FFFs has not been all that exciting. I mean, sound is a big part of a game, sure, certainly. But there's a lot more. I'm sure there's a lot more that they're just holding on to, that hopefully they'll be releasing in the coming FFFs. But other than that, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.